Florida Governor Ron DeSantis refutes Harris's claim that he refused her call. Can North Carolina voters in this critical swing state overcome Hurricane Helene challenges? Hillary Clinton is worried that America has lost total control of the internet and then proposed a repeal of Section 230. This is Dr. David D. Schein for a special episode of Saving America with our weekly update. And now for our report. I'm pretty sure the whole world knows about the atrocities on October 7, 2023. 1,200 innocent civilians were slaughtered. 250 hostages were taken. A handful returned under a badly botched USA hostage plan some months back. But the rest have been held under terrible conditions. Many of them are dead. In fact, most recently, 6 hostages, including an American, were executed rather than allowing them to be rescued by the IDF. Gaza stands in ruins, which is sadly appropriate, given the cowardly Hamas hide behind their own civilians. I do quickly point out that UN workers and civilians were involved in the attack on the innocent Israelis on October 7th. In other words, I have zero sympathy for the ludicrous and brainless protesters against Israel. With the recent Israeli approach to bombing the terrorists in Lebanon and Yemen, it appears that Israel, pointedly without the support of USA and France, is doing the work for the rest of the world in cleaning up these major terrorist threats. The whole world waits to see what Israel will do with Iran. As America continues cleaning up from the megastorm Helene, it is not a surprise that politics have taken center stage. Over the last week, a controversy has arisen as to whether FEMA has blown much of its money meant to help Americans in emergency situations like Helene on taking care of illegals. DHS, Department of Homeland Security Chief Alejandro Mayorkas, was quoted as saying that FEMA has no money left to help Americans in need. He specifically said that after Hurricane Helene relief, that FEMA will be out of money. It seems odd that DHS had billions to spend to fly illegals in and around the country while feeding, housing, and clothing them. And at the same time, Blinking Fool is proudly announcing that the USA has sent hundreds of millions to Lebanon and Syria to help out in conflicts that are a direct result of failed governments in those countries. How is it the responsibility of the USA? Saudis and the UAE have plenty of their oil money they can spend on this situation, and that is much closer to their countries than it is to the United States. Both sides are making arguments, but it does appear that billions upon billions are being wasted by our federal government, and it is not being spent on citizens trying to recover from Helene. Then to add insult to injury is the Cat 5 Hurricane Milton with a direct hit near Tampa, Florida. The only good news is that Ron DeSantis, the GOP Florida governor, is on top of things, and the state appears to have done all it can to prepare and respond. Just before the storm hit, Harris triggered a firestorm by claiming that DeSantis had refused to call with her. The comedy here is that she is not president. She is not authorized to send help to Florida or any other state. In turn, DeSantis refuted her statement and said if she had called, if he was unavailable, he would have called her back. He apparently considered her claim nothing more than a campaign stunt. And Harris, apparently stung by criticism, even from the slopstream media, suddenly decided to show up at what she saw as friendly media sites, including, of all things, a sex talk podcast. Folks, this is not one of those. And we would certainly be happy to have Miss Harris check in with us. Folks, most Americans with IQs higher than the temperature at the South Pole know that The View is a joke. Of course, that's why appearing there and with one of the late night losers really won't move the needle. Even worse, when she did a long interview with Oprah and then a session on 60 Minutes, she failed. Of course, she declined an interview with Fox. On 60 Minutes, she admitted that she would change nothing about what the Biden-Harris administration has already done. She did not defend the ridiculous and massive failure at the border that she and Biden caused. When confronted, she tried to make it sound like somehow the Republicans were responsible. The situation is 4 times worse than when Trump was in office. How could this be a GOP problem? All told, unless you're a hardcore Dem voter, nothing that Harris has said will be changing your mind. Not a single solution has been articulated by Harris. Blaming Trump, who's been gone nearly 4 years, and the Congress when the Dems hold the presidency and the Senate and are only behind in the House by a few votes is a dead-on arrival strategy, in my humble opinion. Can North Carolina voters in this critical swing state overcome Hurricane Helene challenges? As if the Republicans did not have enough to worry about with all the varying poll results, now the question is whether the hard-hit western and southern areas of North Carolina that took the biggest hit will be able to actually vote despite all the flood damage. It matters since these are the more conservative parts of this swing state. The state took a hit that means housing is in short supply, roads are missing or impassable, and communication systems are down. Elon Musk has been trying to help out with his Starlink system. That is certainly helping, but the need in certain parts of the state is overwhelming. Some information from an article in the Daily Signal had some interesting perspectives on the situation in North Carolina. And to quote, the NC Election Board unanimously voted to allow 13 counties most affected by the storm to make changes in the election procedures, so long as there is bipartisan majority to do so. This would include changing or adding voting sites and notifying voters by mail and through local media about such changes as quickly as possible. The resolution adopted by the state board allows the chairman of local election boards to appoint replacement members if someone is unable to carry out his or her duties. Quoting the executive director of the State Board of Elections, these measures were put in place to ensure the victims of Helene can vote in the upcoming election and provide election officials in the hardest hit areas the tools they need to conduct a secure election under extraordinarily difficult circumstances, end quote. Note that North Carolina has a Democrat governor, adding to the concerns of the GOP. Dem majority Federal Communications Commission helping George Soros fast-track takeover of a huge nationwide radio network. All Americans should be concerned about a proposed takeover of about 200 radio stations in the United States. The acquired stations tout 165 million monthly visitors. Many conservative radio shows are presently on these stations, including hosts Sean Hannity, Mark Levin, Glenn Beck, and Eric Erickson. To do so, Soros has asked the FCC to waive a current FCC rule that foreign company ownership of U.S. radio stations is not allowed to exceed 25%. Regardless of your political viewpoint, this many stations under control of one person or entity is bad for America's democracy and for freedom of the press. In an important article that was carried via NTD but uses data from Reuters, there are significant changes in the job market that could be a harbinger of tougher times to come. And this is regardless of what happens in the big election nearby. The 53% increase in layoffs is at the highest level since 2020, when America experienced the COVID layoffs. Taking the hit were technology, entertainment and leisure, education, transportation, and manufacturing. In other words, pretty much across the board. In terms of reasons, the outplacement firm Challenger Gray and Christmas noted cost-cutting, business closures, and artificial intelligence as top reasons. Further, projected hiring is down to a very low level, other than hiring for the holidays, which is generally for low-wage jobs in addition to being temporary. Hillary Clinton is worried that America has lost total control of the internet and then proposed removal of Section 230. Miss Irrelevancy herself is shooting her mouth off again. The sore loser is obviously worried that the Dems will lose the upcoming election and the internet will not be bowing down to her party. She tried to make it sound like the internet is dangerous for kids and named sites like Instagram, Twitter X, TikTok, and Facebook. The fascinating story is that only Twitter X is really independent. The other sites have been in the back pocket of the Dems for years. So I'm not sure she knows what she's talking about. Section 230 is reference to a statute that says that internet sites are merely carrying information and they are not responsible for the content carried on their site. I endorse the statute with the proviso that they cannot slant the material on their sites. So far, all of the sites she named, and in fact, most of them, are censoring conservative speech. Twitter X is included, but then changed tunes when Elon Musk took it over. Again, my response is they need to be held to being common carriers and stay out of censorship. I, of course, also note that there's a huge amount of really bad stuff out on the internet, and that's called the dark web. The feds have no answer for that. Clinton's silly remarks were under the guise of protecting children. Of course, communists view children as belonging to the state, not their parents. I do urge parental controls. It's called parents watching what their own kids do, monitoring their screen time, giving them a good and moral education. Unfortunately, for those in the current day public schools, it includes saving them from the nonsense being forced on them in many classrooms. She is simply a bitter old biddy. In certainly some unwelcome news, the Wall Street Journal reports that Chinese hackers breached the US court wiretap systems. This stunning report claims that the Chinese hackers accessed the networks of the US broadband providers, including Verizon Communications, AT&T, and Lumen Technologies. Garnered from the systems were information that the federal government uses for court-authorized wiretapping. Of course, the foreign ministry of Red China, the biggest bunch of liars in the world, other than the US Democrat Party, of course, claimed that this was a false narrative. America must do better to harden its computer infrastructure. It must be the best in the universe. The survival of our country depends on it. We wrap with an interesting story. A rescue dog leads police to injured 84-year-old owner, thereby saving his life. The story was carried by multiple sources, including NTD. So a couple of weeks ago, Deputy Wright of the Stevens County Sheriff's Office in Washington State was out patrolling a rural wooded area. All of a sudden, he comes across a dog sitting in the middle of the road. It was a black and white border collie. And most people know dogs know border collies are darn smart. The officer got out of his vehicle but didn't see anyone around. He tried to get the dog into his cruiser, but the dog just wouldn't go. He then did a survey of the nearby homes, but there was nothing visible that he could see. By this time, the dog was laying in the middle of the road. When Deputy Wright approached the dog then got up and trotted up a little used trail. He followed to find an 84-year-old man with a broken leg who could not move. He helped the man who had been there for hours to safety. The 13-year-old dog named Gita was a rescue dog. I believe she has repaid her owner for rescuing her. Now, before anyone thinks that saving America is going to the dogs, this is Dr. David D. Schein signing off for this week's episode. Subscribe on your favorite platform.